Now, I love treacle pie, ever since my granny used to make it. But it's the first time I've actually tasted treacle and crumble together. But it's inspired me to make this dish. So the first thing we need is to make our pastry. And for that, you need everything really chilled. Even the flour's in the fridge. The butter's come out the freezer and the icing sugar in the fridge. Sounds unusual, but you want to keep it nice and cold. Start mixing the butter, sugar and flour together. Now, the secret of having things really chilled is the butter incorporates with the flour much better and you get a finer crumb. So you get a much better pastry at the end of the day. When the mixture resembles fine breadcrumbs, add 1 egg to bind the pastry together. You don't want to over-mix it because it's going to toughen up that flour, and if it toughens up the flour, it's going to shrink when you line your tart tin. Finish bringing the pastry together by hand and then wrap it in cling film. This needs to sit in the fridge now for a good 30 minutes. And once rested, it's firm enough to roll out on a lightly floured surface. Make sure you get it nice and thin. So you roll it over the rolling pin. Very quickly, just get a non-stick flan case and then roll it over the top, lifting it above. You don't want to allow the rolling pin to touch the case, because otherwise it will break it. Then tuck the pastry into the tin, being careful not to pull or stretch it. Trim around the edge, then line the case for baking. Now, this is a tip you learn as a chef in a restaurant. Baking beans are quite expensive, so we don't really use them. So we can either use rice or flour. Flour being probably the cheapest thing in the kitchen. And if you use cling film like this and press it down, it gets right into the edges. The flour will keep the pastry nice and thin and also stop it from shrinking. And baking it at this stage will ensure the pastry is fully cooked and remains crisp when filled. Cook for 15 minutes until the pastry is golden brown. Now get on with the treacle filling. It's just eggs and golden syrup whisked together. Treacle tart traditionally uses breadcrumbs to help it set, but eggs do the trick in this recipe, which makes for a lighter pie. Fill that up. Now what I'm going to do is just finish this off with some pecan nuts. Place it into a low oven and bake for an hour, and then it's all about the topping. So a standard crumble mix. It's butter, flour and demerara sugar rubbed together and spread it out onto a baking tray. But the secret to this, and I think it's the secret to anything that contains that amount of treacle, is salt. It cuts through the sweetness of the treacle and enhances the flavour. Add a good pinch to the crumble mix and then it's ready to bake. And cook this for about 10 minutes. So this is after about an hour in the oven. You can see it's actually quite soft, and that's what you're looking for. It's not as dense and as heavy as treacle tart with the breadcrumbs. Still be able to slice it, but nice and soft. But this is the real key, I think, this salt crumble. On its own, you want to put that on your chips. With this, it's fantastic. Even though you've got all that treacle in there, it's the salt that cuts through the sweetness. And there you have it, my treacle pie with sea salt crumble. The texture is very similar to sort of shoe fly pie, but it's not as dense